Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Remote Learning in Higher Education, Teaching Industrial Design in the Online Classroom. I'm Nick Smith, the Senior Manager of Marketing for Wacom's B2B and Education team. Before we get started today, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping details. First, all attendees are going to be in listen-only mode. Please submit any questions via the Q&A function, and we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the session. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send out a follow-up email on how to access the recording and other helpful resources once the webinar is complete today. Our presenter today is Antonio Borja, the Director of the School of Industrial Design at Academy of Art University in San Francisco. Antonio graduated from the School of Industrial Design at Academy of Art in 2004. After a career as an industrial designer, which included work for General Motors as a creative designer, Antonio returned to the Academy of Art to teach design drawing, transportation design, and digital 3D modeling courses. Today, he leads an interdisciplinary collaborative program that gives students hands-on experience with companies such as NASA, Samsung, Audi, Nissan, Citroën, General Motors, and Jaguar. As the director of the School of Industrial Design, he has successfully worked to integrate the latest rapid prototyping, generative design, and visualization methods into the industrial design curriculum. With that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Antonio. Antonio, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. I'm pretty excited to be able to showcase some of our students' work and some of the workflows that we're teaching them now that we've gone virtual as well as online. So with that said, I am going to turn everything over to my second monitor, but I just wanted to say hello to everyone and thank everyone for coming to check out the webinar today. Pretty excited to showcase this new workflow, and like I said, also share some of the student work that we've created this past semester. So with that, I'll stop video and we'll switch over. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to cover is, the way that we at Academy of Art leverage the power of our remote services that we were able to provide to our students. As you guys know, many of us got caught off guard in the sense that at first we thought we were going to be remote for just a few weeks. And then it turned into being remote for the whole semester as well as our summer semester. So with that said, what we did at the university is we were able to provide our students with the ability to check out Wacom Cintiqs, Dell workstations, Oculus Rift S's. We also gave them remote access to our computer labs. As you know, when it comes time to render your images, a lot of times you need a lot of processing power. So students were able to log in remotely no matter where they were, even the students that, some of the students that went back home to Europe or to Asia, they were still able to log into our computer labs, upload their projects, and have our computers render their stuff. The other thing that we were able to provide our students is the ability to be able to 3D print their stuff in our 3D print shop. So again, students submitted their files through email and we were able to 3D print them and then send it back to them so that they can use it in their testing or use it as part of their final projects. And then also where it was a little bit more of a challenge is in some of the classes where they're required to create 3D artifacts. So for those classes, our modeling team was able to create model making kits for them and send out to them. In some cases, if they're in San Francisco, we set up a pickup station at our downtown campus. And then for those students that had gone home, we were able to ship it to them. So all in all, I think, we try to do as best we can under the situation to still support the students in their remote learning through these services. Now, one thing that we're really fortunate is that our program is actually completely online as well. So although students, sign up for on-site classes, which are generally held in person, and online classes, which are asynchronous classes that are taught through our learning management system, we, in the on-site side of things, we still use the LMS system for students to submit their assignments. So students are already used to submitting their assignments digitally online, regardless of whether it's an online class or an on-site class. So with this, we, the instructors, can go into the actual assignment, provide feedback to the students, and then they're able to retrieve that feedback when they log in. But in addition to this, we also used Zoom a lot. And so Zoom allowed us to be able to still hold weekly meetings with our students and our faculty. And as you can see, here's some example pieces. You guys are getting a sneak peek of the Audi project that we're going to be submitting to Audi tomorrow. Actually, we'll be presenting virtually. It's kind of unfortunate because the students were actually going to get to go to Germany to present at the studio there, but instead they're going to be presenting virtually. But nonetheless, using these platforms, we're still able to hold breakout rooms. We were able to then be able to meet with each individual design team and give them feedback that way. So that's one of those things where, again, I think even though some students did end up going back home to Europe and Asia, we still were able to keep on pace and we're still able to collaborate and work together. And so here's some of the sample pieces that you guys can see from this type of collaboration.
Hey,
Now,
Antonio, a couple questions from the audience I think would be good to address now.
sure.
The first are around your technology. So what did you use to enable the students to use the university's processing power remotely?
So we use a combination of tools. Primarily, we used AnyDesk as well as TeamViewer. And we also used VPNs where possible. That was mostly for faculty though.
Yeah, so was there then a follow-up to that from another attendee was there a virtual workstation option or and not just rendering remotely?
So basically what's the way that worked is students logged in, they were given a username, a key and a password, and they log into that machine and they work on that machine like they're there in person. So they're able to load their file and they're able to then load up their renderings and have the machines render overnight. And then basically the machine is just set up to save the file in OneDrive when it's done. And so then the student can retrieve the file from OneDrive. We also, that's the other thing that, again, made things a lot easier for us is all our students have access to OneDrive. We provide our students with OneDrive for their email client as well as their cloud storage solution as well.
Great, thank you. And then one more question. What is your preferred LMS?
So our LMS, we actually use our proprietary LMS, our learning management system, and I'll go back to it. Our learning management system is our very own, and that's the one that we've been using since we started our online courses.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we'll continue. So one of the things that we also started doing a lot of in the past year, and I think it was fortunate that we did, is we've partnered with actually Gravity Sketch and Wacom. We were brought together at the GDC about 2-3 years ago, I believe. And so what we started doing is doing a lot of virtual reality sketching. And the reason we like this virtual reality sketching format so much is that students are able to actually design in what feels like a one-to-one environment. We bring in the last of the shoe. Students are able to work on it directly. And so we feel it's the closest thing you can get to actually modeling a real one-to-one scale artifact. We've also started using Clo a lot, especially for soft goods projects. So this is one of my students, Lisa Payer, who did the Easy collection. And here again, you can see on the left-hand side, she's manipulating the garment on the actual 3D model on the mannequin. And then also on the right-hand side, that's where she has the actual patterns and she's making adjustments there as well. So, we don't have access to being able to sew at the moment. You use any of our sewing machines. Our shops are all closed, but, we felt that this was a good alternative to, not being able to be on site and doing some of this work that we traditionally would do in the studio. And then here is another example of, now leveraging tools like Fusion 360, where again, we can bring in our sketches and create quick models. And one of the things that we'll be showcasing to you later on is kind of this workflow where we're taking a sketch, the idea is you take a quick doodle and you make a model that then you can visualize to a high level. But in this case, one of the things that we added to it is the use of Adobe Aero, which I'll be showing to you guys shortly. So here you guys can see some of the outcomes of that workflow that we're using. That's primarily, a computer workflow, digital workflow. Here's another example of a transportation design student, Santiago Bastidas. He did this for Citroën. And so this project is the Citroën Aura. And one of the main things about this project was the fact that he wanted to create an interior that had collapsible components. And so, again, he designed it in Gravity Sketch, where he was able to expand and contract the components and kind of test them out. You're able to evaluate the design in first person, which I think, again, is really good. And also, when you're walking around the vehicle, it's 1-to-1 scale. So it feels a lot more realistic than just, looking at a monitor and looking at a really scaled down version of your design. So this is one thing where, again, leveraging some of the tools that are available to us now, like VR and AR, to enable us to, be able to contextualize our ideas right now that we don't have access to our shops. And here you can see the final outcome of that project. Where you can see, the design where the front seats are collapsible, so is the bench seat, and that can rotate around, and it can comfortably sit up to 6 people. And again, the main thing that drove this design was the fact that he was able to validate the placement of the architecture and the placement of the components within that architecture in Gravity Sketch in an augmented reality platform. And then here's the final design. I also have shared the link to, I think at the end of the presentation here, we shared the link to our Spring Show website, so I encourage you guys to see it. You guys can go and explore these projects a little bit more thoroughly. Here I'm just highlighting the actual workflow that we did in order to create the projects, but you can learn more about those projects by visiting that website. All right, and so that puts us at our feature demo. But before I get into this, I want to stop again and see if there's any questions or if there's any other comments from the audience. Nick?
Yeah, a follow-up question. When we were talking about the remote computer access for your students, if you could say again the brand names of the technologies you guys are using for that.
Sure. We used AnyDesk. And we also use TeamViewer. TeamViewer has been our primary one that we use. We were able to get licenses for the students who needed to have remote access.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. So any other questions before we move on to the fun stuff?
Not right now. You're good to go.
All right, let's get started then. All right, so in this next part of the presentation, I just kind of want to show you guys, I'm going to do a quick overview and then I'm going to get into the files so that we can talk about them a little bit more thoroughly. So here I'm just showing again, one of the workflows that I teach the students is to just, do quick sketching, quick ideation sketching that you can take from line work and go into Photoshop and add some form to it so that way it feels more realistic. And then once you get a presentation piece like this, then we can bring it into our CAD soft program. And so that can either be, and our students are trained in using not only Fusion 360, but also Rhino, Alias, and SolidWorks. So for us, we're agnostic to that. We just really want, it's like they each have their strengths. And so we teach our students all those different packages because depending on the project that they're working on, some of those are going to be better suited than others. So for here, because it's mostly a form project, I love using the form tools, the subdivisional modeling in Fusion 360. I think it's really fun. It's really intuitive. And as you guys can see here by the video, it's really quick to generate the forms that follow your design intent. And again, it doesn't take too much effort. The learning curve is not that steep. So, you're able to pick this up. And again, I mean, for us, we feel so confident in the software is that we now teach it to our, it's our first semester software that we teach to our incoming freshmen. And again, we've been having great results. So here you can see, again, I basically start off with a plane and I'm just manipulating the surfaces to start matching not only the sketch, but you guys also see we have a foot model there that we're able to use as reference to make sure that our proportion that we're designing is somewhat accurate. And so, again, remember, this is just a concept. We're not completely 100% sure that this is the way we're going to go, but we want to be able to visualize it and see it in context with the real shoe, and that's going to be the goal here. So from there, we're going to go into Adobe Dimension, where we'll be able to assign different materials to it. Now, the reason I chose Adobe Dimension and not our traditional visualization software like KeyShot or VRED is because I want to prepare the file to be able to share it using Adobe Aero, which is an AR app by Adobe. And again, the main driver for that is I want to be able to see my design in context in the real world. And so this program allows me to assign shaders and export it directly from here into Adobe Aero. And then I can create videos like these next ones here, where you can see in the back there's a real shoe, and here in front of us is our shoe that we designed based on the sketch that I generated earlier. And then here's, more in the outworld environment. And then, so again, it looks like it's there, but it's all AR. Again, it gives you an idea of what your shoe is going to look like. And again, this is still just the ideation phase. So, I mean, we can definitely do multiple of these, but it's great to be able to put it into context. And then here for fun, I did a version for my daughter and a version for my son. So I shrunk the one for my 6-year-old daughter, Sarah. And then for my son, Marcos, I did it in the kit color of his soccer team, his Mount Diablo AYSO soccer team. So, and then the final render that we created from an Adobe Dimension render, I'm going to show you guys how to grab that render and then add a little bit of magic to it at the end to still make it a little bit more humanistic in the sense that it feels like it's not just data that is visualizing your design. There's still a little bit of an artistic flair to it. And so that's one thing that I'll cover as we get into the actual demo here. So that's a quick overview. At this point, I'm going to stop and see if you guys have any questions. If not, I'm going to jump into Photoshop and get started.
Yeah, a couple quick questions. First, is the shoe that you're drawing is over a 3D model or a picture? What's the file format of the 3D shoe?
So the initial shoe that I sketched was just a shoe. It was just a sketch. It's just a side view sketch. I didn't sketch it over a package. As you guys can see, when I brought it into the model, the shoe was actually a little bit too long. The 3D model that I brought in is actually around the size of my foot. So yeah, so the idea here is that, yeah, you're going to do quick visualization of a design. And then obviously, like any time when you bring it into your CAD, you do want to vet some of the dimensions to make sure that they're somewhat accurate to the proportion that it needs to be. And so that's where I brought in the human foot, so that way you guys can, so then that way the sketch doesn't look like just like a stretched noodle. It actually looks like a human foot can fit inside of it.
Perfect. And then there's been a couple questions around internet access for your students and those that may not have adequate internet access, and what's really needed to run some of these programs, and how have you guys been able to address the internet access issue if you have one?
Honestly, fortunately for us, we didn't really run into that. We had some students who, did have some issues with it, but for them, we were able to provide them with machines that they would be able to work on their projects locally. But yeah, I mean, it is a challenge for sure. But I mean, I think, for the most part, we were able to work around. I know that for our remote access software, our computer lab tech manager, Gino, he had to actually make some adjustments to the program and to make sure that the latency issue that we were having initially got minimized as much as possible. So that is one thing that we had, but our IT team and our IT manager was able to take care of it, just working with the vendors and then just also optimizing the pipeline to our actual computer labs.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
yeah, and again, I mean, that is one thing that did put a stress on the network, I can tell you that, because now instead of students working locally on the computers, they're logging in remotely. So obviously the internet is there to have them be able to access content when they need it, but primarily they're working locally. But when everyone's logging in remotely, it does put more of a stress on the system. But like I said, our IT team was able to take care of it, and we really didn't have any issues around that. So
Okay,
any other questions?
nope, I think we're good to keep going.
All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Photoshop then. Yes, give me 1 second here. There we are. Okay, so can everyone see this fine? Just want to make sure that my...
Yep, we can see Photoshop.
Perfect. So I'm going to give you guys a big disclaimer. This is the file that I used originally to create the content that you guys saw. But like I said, I am going to walk you guys. Through it. Like step by step how I do it. But I am going to be doing a little bit of the cooking show style, which you're going to see me start to put some ingredients together, but then all of a sudden I'm going to pull some stuff out of the oven and it's going to be done. So that is my disclaimer to you guys. I just want to make sure you guys understand what's going on here. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video again, so that way you guys aren't staring at the top of my head. All right, let's rock and roll. So generally when I'm starting to sketch, like in this case, we're going to do a shoe. I'll probably start with a bunch of doodles of profiles and whatnot. But here I'm pretty much, I know that I just want to create a quick sketch that basically, a basketball shoe that I can create a quick little model and bring into AR. So I'll open up my architecture so you guys can kind of see. Basically, usually we'll just start off with an actual line work sketch like this. And then from there, I block in the actual volume and then, do the different graphics, do a little bit of form, with core and then with highlights. And then from there, we go and add a little bit more sizzle to it. We take off the sketch lines and then, we add some textures and whatnot, and we arrive at this. So this is gonna be the goal. So let's go ahead and, like I said, we'll go ahead and get started, make a new layer. Brush-wise, I used to love just making my own brushes, but quite frankly, as you guys know, Adobe now updates everything every year. So I just really found it easier to just grab the default brushes and just work with those. I still do have some brushes that I'll bring in every now and then, but for the most part, I primarily work with the soft round pressure opacity brush, the hard round pressure brush, and then and I think that's it pretty much. I mean, it's mainly those two that I'm using. Oh, the soft round pressure size, this one as well. And so for me, again, when I'm doing line work, I just want something that's going to give me a nice clean line. I will go into my flow here, and usually I like to bring it around 50% or so. That way I can build up lines. And then the opacity as well, I can bring that down into like the 60 range. So here again, we'll get started with just a nice. And I am just, you guys may ask, okay, how is it that, we're getting such light line work? And I'm basically just not really pressing down on the brush at all. I'm trying to mimic, what I would do in a real sketch, which is just try to keep it as light as possible. I'm holding my stylus, fairly high here. The higher you hold it up on the barrel, the lighter line work you can achieve. Again, it's not going to be an exact one, but it's going to be fairly close. So once I have the design up to a certain point, then at this point, here what I'm doing is I'm kind of sketching in my quote unquote theoreticals. I still refer everything, being a car designer, I'm still referring to a lot of the nomenclature from car design. So basically, I just want to showcase like where the actual shoe is wrapping around. So, and then that's going to help me later on when I actually need to, that's going to help me later on when I actually need to shade in the form. So any questions here so far?
No questions yet on your process here. Somebody did ask if you were using the remote access to the AAU machines to do this demo.
No, I'm not. I'm working locally on a Mobile Studio Pro. I'm sorry, that is a shameless plug to Wacom, but it is the industry standard and that's what we use. All right, so once I have my line work here, and let's say I'm happy with it. Typically, this can be considered just a quick, nice little rough sketch. I can a lot of times what I like to do is kind of zoom out on it and kind of do a little bit of cross hatching to kind of inform myself of where I'm putting the core. And a lot of times if this is a demo I'm doing for class too, I'll throw in, okay, here's my actual light source. It's coming from the top, right? So I can throw in little reminders for myself. The other thing too that I like to do, and my students know this, is, I'll sketch a little sphere. And kind of shade in the environments. In this case, I'm doing a studio environment. It'll be a dark overhead, and then we're gonna have some lights on the side. So again, just a little shadow there. And again, this, comes off as being reflective. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll do one that's reflective like this, just to kind of, like, if I have a material that's reflective, and then I'll do another one that I'll treat more like an actual matte shading. And I do cheat. I just grab this one, and then, my light source is at the top. So it's going to go from the core where it's going to be the darkest. And then as it approaches the light source, it's going to get lighter. It will diffuse the core a little bit more. Now, direct light is going to be stronger than bounce light, so make sure that the surfaces that are facing downward, still have a little bit of light, but not as bright as what's on the top. So here, pretty much, that gives me a quick indication of, all right, that's the shading that I'm going to be using here. Now it's soft good, so we're mainly going to be using this one. I really don't have reflective elements, but if I wanted to add like a metallic sheen to it or something, then I would deploy the sphere on the right-hand side. All right, so once I have this, I usually like to, I like to keep the original sketch, just because a lot of times it has the initial flavor of the design. But I will go in and clean it up. I do like to clean up my sketches just enough that, I'm able to say, okay, this is the actual design line I want. And this is where the hard eraser comes in, because you guys can see the hard eraser, I can come in and really define those shapes. Now, you'll notice that I'm not really going to worry about the line work that's within the shoe, but the one that I do pay attention to a little bit more is the line work that is defining the silhouette of the shoe. And the reason for that is because, again, I'm going to shamelessly cheat here and then just use a magic wand tool to make a selection and be able to define my form really quickly. So let's go ahead and clean up the outlines. And again, if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm used to answering questions as I'm sketching, so.
Yeah, so a couple questions, Antonio, related to getting equipment in the hands of students. The first part is, were you concerned about lending such expensive equipment to the students and getting it back in good shape? And then the second part of that is, for students who sign up for totally online classes, do they check out equipment from you guys, or do they have to furnish their own?
Now, typically our students who are online only, we require them to get their own equipment. And then as for the question about checking stuff out, yes, we were concerned, and students did have to, sign release forms and all that legal stuff, and to make sure that they understood the responsibility of checking out the equipment. Yeah, and again, I think, our students, they're used to, interfacing with the equipment on campus. And, at the end of the day, we tell them it's their equipment. We want them to treat it as such. It's not, we purchase it for their use. So, if anything happens to the equipment, they're pretty much hurting themselves more than they're hurting anyone else. So we definitely try to instill that sense of ownership in the equipment that we have. So that way students, again, can be a little bit more careful with it. And I think for the most part they are. So. All right, any other questions, guys?
Yeah, a question for me is, how have your students adapted to remote learning? What were, some of the biggest challenges that you guys really encountered? And then on the flip side of that, what are some of the biggest successes that you've seen from going online?
Well, I mean, one of the things is, as you guys can see right now in like this type of format of teaching where, um, you know, it it's still like right now it feels like I'm in your space and I'm talking to you directly. And I think that's one thing that a lot of the students have been telling us that they've liked about this format. They actually feel in a way more connected because a lot of times, especially with the larger classes in the classroom, it feels like, they have to wait their turn to get their critique. Or, when I'm doing a demo, I may have, 10 people around me. And so they don't feel like, they're able to, it doesn't feel as personal, I guess, as it is, when I'm doing this, it feels like, again, I'm speaking just directly to one person, even though, I'm doing this for countless other people. So that's been a thing that they've said that they loved. Every single meeting that we have with our students via Zoom is recorded. So every demo that we do, students are able to reference back to it. And then, they're able to have that so that way they can learn from it. Or if like there's a part that they missed, then they're able to go back to it and refer to it. As opposed to having to refer back to their notes, or even sometimes they remember the wrong thing and they do the wrong thing. So with that, I think this format in many cases has been really beneficial. But I think at the end of the day, most industrial designers, we're social creatures, we design for mankind. And so, we like being around people, we like interfacing with our customers, with our target market. And I think that's the part, honestly, that's been the most challenging because, where traditionally we would go and do user testing or show concepts and prototypes to people and get feedback. Also, getting feedback from our classmates and our colleagues. That's something that we're not able to do as easily. Now, there are tools that are coming out right now that are definitely helping with that. But it's still it's still not the equivalent of doing something in person at the moment. There are some things, like I said, that, like, for example, like doing digital sketching demos, like what I'm doing right now. This is, I think, to me, this is in many ways even better than just me doing it live in front of you, because, it's recorded, you can refer back to it. But, at the end of the day, I think, again, we still miss that interaction of just having our classmates, coming in the morning. I used to love coming in and watching all the awesome work that my students were creating. And that's one thing that, definitely, we're missing, but we're trying to find new tools, and there are new tools that, I think we're going to deploy shortly that are going to help us with that. One tool like that is this whiteboard feature that we're looking at, where, students can post up their work on virtual walls and then people can leave feedback on it, much like you would in the real studio. So like I said, I mean, we're always looking for what technology can we use to help us with being able to, again, feel like we're still in the studio together. So by the way, here, just an update on the sketch. You guys can see I just, I use the magic wand tool to make a selection. Now here, basically, I'm defining the graphic there. And so here, I have the sketch up at the top, and I'm just gonna set that sketch at multiply. And then a lot of times what I'll do is, because the profile is really important, I may spend a little bit more time with the profile here, because I'm going to be using this as a quick selection mask by just hitting Control and clicking on it. So, so that's something that I definitely want to make sure that this is a clean selection, and you guys can see right now, it still looks like a dinosaur, not at the edges of it. So we'll clean that up quickly here.
And another question, Antonio, do you hold live group crits? And if so, could you describe the setup and process for setting those up?
Sure. So for those, what we do is we do a Zoom review, and what we do is the students will submit all their work to our learning management system, and there we'll be able to all reference the same files at the same time if necessary. And basically during that forum, what I do as instructor is I share my screen and I just go through all of the students' work and give them feedback directly. Now we do have a whiteboard feature on our LMS where we can leave the feedback to make sure that students understood what the comments were and what things that they need to do to optimize their work for the next week. So that is one thing that that is one format that we use. The other format is just using Zoom, which again with Zoom, we're able to just have the students log in and have them share their screens. And as they're sharing their screens, as you guys may or may not know, but Zoom has a few basic annotation features on it where you as instructor can annotate the work and have discussions around areas that need to be worked on. And so with that, it works pretty efficiently. The other thing that we do is when we need to share files, I'll have them share their files via the chat portal. So they're able to send their files through chat. And then when they send it through the chat portal, I'm then able to open up the file on my end and then give them feedback on their work. And basically, as I'm giving them feedback, it's kind of like what I'm doing here. Let's say this was students' work. I'm telling them, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to add the core, make sure that we define the form, it needs to look soft. So we're going to, use our soft airbrush. We're going to define the back part here, the heel. And basically, as I'm doing this, because we're doing it all through Zoom, we're recording it to the cloud. And then once the class concludes, we are then able to share that recording with them, and then they're able to reference it. So basically, the way we've been holding class is very similar to this format in the sense that instead of me working, on my own work, I would be working, on students' work. But like I said, it's very similar to what we're doing here, which is just, being able to give feedback, being able to discuss things that need to be optimized in the design, and then students can see it live on their screens as I'm providing the feedback, and then they're able to implement it into their own work.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And then just a follow-up, if you could go into more detail about how you use the whiteboard for student comments. Are all students able to add their own comments or only the instructor?
For our whiteboard, students can add comments as well too. They have a comment section that they can access. But primarily it is used mainly by the instructor, to share feedback. But we definitely encourage, especially for our online only students, part of their grade is a participation grade, and with them, we definitely encourage them to post feedback on their classmates' work as well. That's actually part of their grade, is because, one of the things that we find, it's, when you're in an online forum, especially when it's asynchronous, as our online classes are, it's harder to build that community, to have that sense of community. And so one of the ways that we try to encourage that is through actually, making it so that part of the student's grade is them giving feedback to their classmates on their projects.
And one more question real quick. And before that, just a time update. We've got about 10 minutes left before we need to get to final Q&A.
Yeah.
But how do you handle building / printing physical models for remote students, or do they just submit the digital CAD versions?
They submit their digital CAD versions and then we 3D print it, and then they can pick it up at our downtown campus, or in certain cases, we can ship it to them. Because, you know, for example, this semester we had a project with Oru Kayak and Autodesk. And so some of the students still needed to 3D print. Now, one thing that we're seeing more of is a lot of students are just buying their own 3D printers as well. But for those students that did need to 3D print, we were able to just 3D print the pieces and send it to them. Another thing that I didn't mention, you know, because we had, when everything came down, it was right after midterms for us. So we had a lot of 3D printers that were down. And so basically, at that point, our lab manager, our workshop manager, Max Niehaus, came up with the idea of using the 3D printers that were not being used to start 3D printing face shields. And so we started 3D printing face shields while we waited for the students to give us data for their final projects. So what that did is it also allowed us to, you know, get into practice just being able to output the 3D models and be able to prepare them for shipping. And that's one thing that, you know, that definitely helped us out with. So with that said, you guys can kind of see the workflow again of generating the sketch. I was pretty off. There's the actual one that I did earlier. But I mean, you guys can still see again, that's the concept behind it is that. And then, you know, from there, we move on to adding a little bit of embellishments to it. So under my render here, you'll see that, you know, I still have my line work. You know, usually I'll start taking off the line work as I move closer to the actual sketch. And so here, we'll turn that off. That's the clean line work. And then from there, my actual render feature, I'll go through that with you guys just really quickly so we can jump into the fusion part to again show you guys how we go with that. So basically here, you know, we have our render. Okay, so this is the render that's already complete. And then from there, we'll go into adding a little bit of background. I blur I do a little reflection. You guys can see I did a little bit more detailing, added some noise to the white portion there. I grabbed the texture that I just created by just grabbing an X here. And then basically I just scaled it enough times there that I can just grab this and then use the warp feature to kind of warp it over the form. So that's typically what I'll do to get my texture. So this is the feature that I use, and I usually will set it to overlay. You guys can see it gives you that really cool effect. So since, you know, we're running low on time here, again, we're going to the oven and we're grabbing our fully baked cake. And, you know, this is pretty much where we would end up at. So then from here, you know, we move on to Fusion 360, where we're able to then grab that same sketch. And you guys can see it here, I've already brought it in. But basically, when you open up 360, you're going to make sure that you're under form. And what we'll do is, and we'll go through the process here, you insert canvas. And so in this case, I'm going to insert from my computer. We'll go to our demo here. And I believe here it is. Select that face. And you guys can see it's fairly tiny there, but usually what I do is I can come into it. That's how you bring it in. And then here, we can go ahead and edit canvas. And this is where you can flip it horizontally, make it go the other way. And then here, we can scale it up. Now, I typically like to work in one-to-one anytime I'm doing a digital model. So here for me, the next key thing for you guys to remember when you guys are bringing in your models like this is just to make sure you have at least one dimension. So for me here, I have the dimension of the overall length of the shoe is about 304.8 millimeters. That's what I'm using. So basically I can just right click on it and say calibrate and say from here to here, it's going to be 304.8. All right, so then that scales it to one-to-one. And then once I'm here, then, at this point, the tool that I like to use primarily when building something as organic as a shoe here is usually I like using the quad ball. But in this case, because I had a little bit more design features that I wanted to capture, I actually started with just creating a plane. And so here I just come in and define that plane quickly. I actually start with just one face. And then we're able to select that, hit modify, edit form. And then here again, I'm just going to go to the side view and I'll select the point here and just start putting these into place. So any questions so far?
Just another question about the differences in online learning. Is the curriculum different for online students in terms of group projects, or do they do the same program as the students who normally would attend in person?
So one of the things that we try to do is for the classes, we try to keep the course learning outcomes the same, but the tools used to achieve those outcomes will be different. So for example, if, in an on-site class, the students are expected to create a 3D model of, let's say if they're doing a footwear project, they have to do a 3D model of a shoe, an actual physical model. Then at that point, we would have the on-site students create an actual shoe, while the online ones, we probably would have them use more of digital tools in order for them to be able to achieve their designs. So again, the concept behind that is that we're trying to give them, as close as possible to the same course learning outcomes that they have to meet, but we're allowing them to use the tools that are more readily available for them to achieve that. So for them to achieve those course learning outcomes. So here you guys can see, again, this is the format. I'm just grabbing the edges here. And then from here, like I said, I'm just grabbing this. Again, we'll just do modify, edit form. And then here, I'm just holding Alt to extend those faces. And again, basically here, one of the things that I would do too is I already have an actual foot that I brought in. I think it's over here somewhere, because that's where I modeled the other one. But basically, with the foot there, you're able to, put the foot right over the design. So in this case here, what we'll do is we'll switch over to this other one here. And basically, once you have the foot over the design, like so, then you can continue with the actual modeling. And so here what I did, just to kind of show you guys a breakthrough of, we have our I have a sock liner that I designed. And then on top of that, I created the external form. And then from there, I was able to modify it further. Here, I'll go ahead and turn that off for now. And what I'll do is show you guys again here, we'll go to shaded. So basically, I would continue, you guys can still see these are all just planes. They're nothing more but planes that I just extended all the way through. And again, once I have the form pretty close to where I want that to be at, then at that point here, we're then able to select the bodies that we have here. So in this case, it's this guy. It's our inner liner. And then once we have those bodies, then basically here what we do is we'll go to let's see here.
And we've got about 3 minutes left of our allotted time, Antonio. And just a reminder to the audience, any last minute questions, please submit via the Q&A function.
Okay. Yeah, so then from here again, guys, we just select the bodies that we want to export. So we'll go to Save As, or you can go to Export. And basically here, you just want to make sure you save it as an OBJ. So there it is, OBJ file. So once we've done that, you export that out. And then from there, we open up our other software, which is Dimensions. So here you guys can see, I already have the shoe here in place. So let me go ahead and close the window on all these other programs that we're done with. We're not going to save that. I'm going to jump into Dimension. Oops, there we are. All right, so here, I'm actually going to go ahead and just turn everything off as well, just to kind of show you guys how this stuff comes in. So once you're in Dimension here, you're going to go to File. We're going to import the 3D model. In this case, I'm going to find my one of my previous ones that I had and just open that up for you. And the way it comes in is like this. It's going to be all in one shader. So here quickly we'll just grab it, rotate it to -90. I want to show you guys how easy this is to add textures in this program. So once we have it here, then we can just scroll down to our materials. And in this case, I already kind of have an idea of what I want to do with this. So I'll grab the glossy material for now, and I'm just assigning it to everything. But here you guys can see the bodies that I have within the design already defined here. So that's one of the things where I'll open this up, click on the folder, scroll down. And so I'm going to use this laser cut feature here. I'm going to use that for that guy. You guys can zoom in and see that the UVs are not quite right. So what we'll do is go ahead and select that whole model. So here I'm selecting the whole model and going to generate UVs. And basically what this does is it allows the shaders, to be a little bit more accurate So now that we have that, then I can go to the selected body, which in this case, I believe it's this one here. And here, I can go and change the design. I think our design that we had, it was like a black, it was a black shoe. And then here, I can change the amount of repeat for the texture to make it a little bit more realistic. And then also I can change the patterns and whatnot. So again, this part is pretty straightforward. Again, I want to change the outer body. It's a little too shiny for my taste, so we'll go into it and we'll get the we'll repeat the grain a little bit more and then make it a little bit rougher. And then for the last part, for the actual sock liner, we're just going to grab a felt material here. We'll grab the felt. And so let's go back to that body, which is this one. Click on felt. And then I believe the design had that a little bit closer to white. So I'm going to slide it up, make sure it doesn't go into the red region. And you guys can see there really quickly, I've got my shoe now modeled up. Now, once I'm happy with the shaders, what I'll do is if I want to do this AR in outdoor environment, then I'll bring in the sun directional lights. If I want to do it indoors and I want it to feel more like a studio, then I'll do the 3-point lights or the square light or the circle light. These are all indoor, the 3. So in this case, we're just going to showcase it with a circle light. So I just brought that in. Once that's in the scene, then I can go ahead and select my model there. And again, it's as easy as just going to export, select it for Arrow. You save it on your Creative Cloud. And once it's on the Creative Cloud, you basically are able to download it on your iPad or your iPhone. And then now we've gone, again, from a sketch to an actual AR model that then we can showcase, like what I showed you guys earlier here. We'll go back a few steps here. So again, here again is the actual Adobe Aero app where I'm showcasing the design. Now I did add a little logo there just to add a little bit more detail. But all in all, I mean, this is the process, and this is where, like I said, I think it's it's a great process to be able to still kind of see your designs in context, even though you may not have access to your shop. So I think, again, for virtual learning, this is a tool I think that's going to be become more prevalent as we move forward. Now, again, I don't think also it's going to replace using an actual physical artifact, because as you know, I mean, if we're doing a footwear too, or we're doing a shoe, we want to see how it feels also when wearing it and whatnot. So that's where, you're still going to need to do physical prototypes. But at least I think, by the time you do create your first physical prototype, a lot of the stuff with scale and whatnot and proportions, most of that stuff would already be worked out because you were able to contextualize it in a real world environment. And so for my students, that's the thing that I stress a lot is, there's a lot of times where they do their first 3D prints, and what happens is, the scale's off, the proportions off, and a lot of that had to do is because they're looking at it in a 2-dimensional monitor, and it feels like it's the right size. It feels like the textures are great and everything because they're zooming in on the model. But then when they see it in 1-to-1 scale, they realize that there's a lot of issues with it. So, that's where, again, I still think there's definitely value in creating an actual artifact. But again, I also think that this is a valuable workflow for people to teach their students so that way, they're able to contextualize their designs much earlier in the creative pipeline. And so with that said, I did promise you guys one more thing, and this will only take 2 minutes, Nick. And that's, I wanted to show you guys with Photoshop also just a few little things that you guys can do to the renders. So a lot of times these programs are creating some really visually compelling renderings of our designs, but I still, I still, again, I don't really consider myself an artist, because I consider myself a designer first. But, we do use art to help us communicate our ideas and to sell our ideas. So I wanted to show you guys this where, basically we bring in our actual render. This was the raw render that came in from the program. But here, what I did is I added a little bit more of the core. I added a little bit more of a highlight there. And then, added some detailing here. And so here, just adding these little, here I popped out popped this part of the shoe out a little bit more. And then brought in a little bit of a shadow on this far side here to make it feel more three-dimensional. And then lastly here with this, what I did is, and this is a technique that, especially in car design, we like to use this a lot. We'll copy all our layers like this, right? And then what we'll do is we go to filter, blur, do a little motion blur. And so what this does, it just kind of gets those pixels down into the ground there. So it's kind of like making your design reflective. And then here, I'll grab the soft airbrush. And then this is just basically, I'm just trying to add some occlusion to the floor here. Get a little bit more of that bounce light in there. And so again, these little things, they all add up, and once I have it in there, and then, I'll go ahead and come in and turn that feature down as well. I don't want it to be too strong. But, with all these little additional things, we're able to get the design to pop a little bit more and to, again, get a little bit more of that art back into it. Here, set this up to overlay. So you guys can see slowly, we're starting to create a more visually dynamic scene. So a lot of times I tell the students, just don't take their renders and just leave them as this. Go in and add your flavor to it. So that way, again, you have something that's visually compelling and someone looks at it and says, I want that. So yeah, so I leave you guys with that. And basically, if you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. But this is like I said, the workflow that I wanted to highlight for you guys. So thank you guys.
Yeah, Antonio, thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. A few more questions came in. I think we can address those and probably wrap. We're about 10 minutes over already. The first one, did you have to set up anything special in your LMS in order to include team projects and student interactions after you had to move classes to remote only?
So our classes, our on-site classes always have a equivalent online section for them because, like I said before, that's where our students submit their work. So we did not have to set that up. That was already set up at the beginning of the semester. The main thing that we needed to do, though, was to schedule Zoom meetings and get Zoom accounts for all of our faculty to be able to hold Zoom meetings, as most of our studio classes are over 6 hours. So, we needed to make sure that our instructors and our students were going to be able to hold a session that was equivalent to the class time.
And then one final question, are the online students and the in-person students in the same section? And do they critique each other's works or witness teacher crits of each other's work?
Currently, they are both in different sections. We have online classes and we have on-site classes. Now, because of the situation currently, we had to switch over to our on-site classes to what we call virtual classes. So the main differentiator between the two for us is that Our online classes continue to be the same. It's asynchronous learning, meaning that the students, will read and watch the videos of all the lectures. They'll submit their work, and they get feedback from the instructor as they're submitting their work. But it's done in an asynchronous manner, and that they don't have to meet at a certain time. Now, for our on-site classes that move to virtual learning, they still have to meet via Zoom at the scheduled time. So if they had a class, like for example, my sponsorship class, that's on Mondays from 8:30 to, or 8:20 to 2:50. So we meet every Monday from 8:20 to 2:50. Students still submit their work in our LMS for that class during that time. And so again, with that is now a mix of both, in the sense that they still get to use the LMS system from the asynchronous learning, but they have the synchronous component, which is done via Zoom. And that's where, again, where we definitely now are really seeing, and I think us and other universities are now seeing the benefits of having synchronous, virtual meet times. And that's one thing that, we're exploring, and hopefully being able to do more of it, because the students tell us that they benefit a lot from it. And we as instructors can see that they benefit a lot from it, because we see the improvement of their work, going up. So we definitely want to continue to do that if it's going to help them.
Perfect. Thank you again for your presentation, and thank you everybody online for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, this has been recorded. We'll send a follow-up to everybody. And with that, I think we're gonna wrap this. But Antonio, thank you again very much.
My pleasure.